Thanks for tuning in to That's What I Call Marketing, the Cannes Sessions. Brought to you by Friedman International, the international campaign experts taking the pain out of your multi-market campaigns. Welcome to That's What I Call Marketing. Yes, it is the Cannes Sessions. These are episodes I recorded when I was at the Cannes Lion Festival of Creativity, so I'm going to be sharing those with you throughout the summer, and I hope you really enjoy these episodes. If you are enjoying episodes of That's What I Call Marketing and can rate or review, it would be really appreciated. It really does help us reach even more people. And of course, thanks a million to Friedman International, who are our partner on these episodes. So first up from the Cannes Sessions is Stephanie Parry, who's EVP of Client Management at JellyFish. Definitely one of the most interesting digital marketing companies operating today. Stephanie's career spans more than 15 years in global marketing. She had roles at Mindshare, Shine for Women, and now JellyFish. Fascinatingly, Stephanie has worked across the UK, US, EMEA, and has partnered with global brands from finance to fashion, and has built a reputation for delivering business results and really around strong, empathetic client partnerships. And we talk a lot about that today. It's a fascinating interview with Stephanie. We talk a lot about the future of the industry. We talk about how you get those relationships right and how you think about global marketing. And of course, that is where Friedman International, our partners of this series, help. So if you need to take the pain out of your international campaigns, you need to check out Friedman International. So let's get right into it with Stephanie Parry. Stephanie, thanks a million for joining me on That's What I Call Marketing. Great to see you.
And you, thank you for having me.
Listen, you were saying that our captions for you and me, the script can't figure out
We're
my
going to talk
accent.
very slowly. We're going to be until we get excited, and then we'll just run on.
Yeah, exactly. So much to talk about. Listen, I'd love to kind of get into a bit of your background. You have a fascinating background, but kind of what drew you into this crazy world of marketing?
Yeah, it's a lovely question. Thank you. I actually did an English and film degree, and it was never my intention to get into marketing. But I am so glad I did. I kind of fell into it, in all honesty, like a lot of people. I was 21, left university, needed a job, and just fell in love with two things, I think. One, the fact that it lets you really kind of understand and obsess over people and what they need and want. And I've always been a curious or nosy person, shall we say. And I'm a big believer in kind of service of people, and so client management kind of allows me to do that. And then on a personal level, when I married my husband, I always said that I didn't always want to live in the UK, and I was lucky enough to have a company at the time that enabled me to do some global moves and jump around the world and have adventures.
So I was gonna ask you about that, because that is a fascinating. Just let people know where you have landed.
Yeah, sure.
What countries first of all?
Well, I mean, kind of straight landed in Cannes, but just temporarily for the week. So I am obviously kind of Welsh born and raised, moved to London, did a couple of years in the London media industry, and then had a conversation. I was at WPP at the time, which was brilliant for global mobility and the ability to do that. And I just went and had an internal conversation, and I very much just said, I want to move, like what's on the table? And my husband always joked that he's like, are you just going to work and throwing darts at a map? Because it was a job in Mumbai, a job in Sydney, and then there was a role setting up a team in Paris on Colgate, and I thought, you know what, that's a train ride away, that'll do my mother, and so we did a few years in Paris, jumped to New York, spent 7 years there, and then kind of came back to London, and have been there back home now for about 3-4 years. So
Paris. Can I ask, were you speaking French? Are you able to speak French?
So I was very lucky. Depends on what time of day you ask me that, to be honest. I'll be more confident in the evening. So I obviously did the kind of GCSE French thing and learnt a little bit before moving, but I was lucky enough that it was an international office, and so work was in English. And we had, I think at the time, there was 40 of us and about 13 nationalities. It was amazing. It was so
cool.
Beautiful. But then obviously, real life was in French, and so my French got better pretty quickly.
Because I worked in a global company, global role, and a lot of my team were in, Germany, France, the Netherlands, Italy, and it was an embarrassment to me, and probably my parents as well, who tried to get me to learn languages. And my teacher my sister is a French and Spanish teacher.
Oh, no, really?
And I
she doesn't for you, it's fine.
No, I should have brought her to work with me. But you're speaking to people who just have, like, perfect English, and I'm just like, oh, this is so embarrassing. So
It is one of the things. I think it's given me, like, having lived obviously in a country where English is not the first language, it's given me a real gratitude for like being able to have English as a first language and the privilege of that. But I have to say, one of the things that I do now when I travel globally is I always joke I can speak 1 or 2 words in pretty much every language, because even if you learn a little bit, it makes a massive difference. And I found that with the French. When we moved, I would try and muddle my way through, and people were so kind. I think it's the intent that really makes the difference. So,
yeah, I think so, isn't it? That you're willing to
Very
try.
much so.
And I did do it as a child once, and in a shop, and the man asked, "Did I speak English?"
It is when you speak in French and they speak back in English. You're like, okay, well, I'm going to keep going. Does your sister try and teach you ever?
Oh yeah. No, God, it was terrible. I don't have the music. Do you sing?
I sing.
There you go. You go.
Well, surely as a Celt, you've got some that in you somewhere, Connor. I don't believe it. But it is, I do, it's interesting. My husband didn't do French kind of at GCSE level, and he isn't a natural linguist. So he was very much kind of doing the verbs and the learning. But he said I'm never going to be fluent because it's not natural for me. And everyone has strengths and weaknesses, right? So you're very good in English, so you're fine. You're fine.
Tell me a bit about Colgate, because I was fascinated about those. Like, you seem to have, again, what seemed to me like a really deep client relationship with Colgate. Tell me a bit about that.
That word is so important to me, the relationship piece. And I have always believed in get to know the human first, right? Because ultimately we're all driven by the same fears, the same social threat and reward states. So it's like, who is the person that I'm dealing with? And I think that's always, and the other thing for me is I'm always going to be honest with a client. I will do it kindly. But that you have to be, right? Because we're all operating in the same space, and that's how you build that trust. And I was really, really lucky with Colgate. They are genuinely one of the most lovely organizations to work with. And we were building with them at the time, right?
Okay.
We were building this centralized kind of full functional cross-agency team for the first time in one space. So they were as invested as we were in making it work. And they were just very human, very lovely. One of their clients flew from New York this year to my big birthday party.
No
so
way.
it's like still have those deep relationships. But I think, I often think as well, like regional and global roles are different, because often you're not in direct control, right? You're working via influence, or you're kind of trying to encourage things, but you don't necessarily say own those budgets or those plans. So I think it's even more important then to be in lockstep with your team. So when you're both going to those local markets, it's connected.
It's such a huge challenge in this world of, I guess, the global marketing world. Like, I work for an Irish brand, and so, I'm really lucky I get to kind of just work on, what we need to do. And we're owned by a Canadian company, but there's not very much, there's oversight, right? And it's fine. But when you're in a global role and you've dealt with global clients and global operations and all of that, it is hard to kind of figure out how you balance the global and local. What have you learned, apart from the relationship thing? Because I think that is fundamental to it, but anything else?
It's a lovely, lovely question. And I kind of boil it down, if I really simplistically, as kind of, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them in proportion.
My dad says that.
Oh, well, do you know what? Whenever I say that, my mother laughs. She said, do you listen to that advice, Stephanie? But there's a real, you can very easily kind of land in a local market and think, I know this. I've read about it, or I've designed something. And we were planning and managing stuff for 65 countries globally, from, markets in Eastern Europe with small budgets to huge Latin markets that operated entirely differently. So really small thing, but the first thing I would do with every market I went to, I'd say, give me an overview, like not just of the kind of media market, but give me an overview of your country, what's going on, like what do I need to know, what are you dealing with culturally, and that when they, you'd see the local teams go, okay, you're not coming in to enforce, you're not coming in to put a hand over me, you're coming in to help with me and lift me up. And I think that's such a big thing, is making sure that even as those influence pieces are designed differently and the control sits differently, making sure that everybody is heard, seen, and you recognize and see those differences.
That's amazing. I was lucky enough, again, I'm so lucky, I've worked with some amazing people, but I've worked with Friedman International to do something very similar, where we were saying, we were doing work in Mexico and we had nobody local to the market.
Yeah.
And I was like, look, what I need you to do is fly me there without flying me there.
Yes.
So with all the research that you can do, paint the picture, tell the story, help me understand the history, the culture, all of that. And they did an amazing job of a really deep dive that helped us kind of understand. And we had sales teams there, so they were able to validate this is right.
The validation is really important,
isn't
I
it?
think. How did that, can I ask you, how that changed how you engaged with your teams?
It changed how we, first of all, thought about the market. It changed how we thought about the opportunities. It changed how we thought about how we should communicate. And we did it in Spain as well, which kind of seems odd because, like, you know, I've been to Spain on holidays, but I didn't know.
It's totally different.
enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even figuring out where business was done and how business was done. And
how business is done is a really, really interesting thing. And that was one of my biggest learning, and I'm sure you kind of had the same experience. That was one of my biggest learning curves, actually, especially in some markets. I remember having very honest conversations with clients around this is the way kind of media deals are done here and how it operates. And to your point around validation, I would kind of talk to people and say, is this what you're seeing? But then, you have to respect that, right? Because if you're going in and trying to work against a system, you're not going to get the best for your teams and the best for your clients. So I think it's, understand the cultural relevance of what's going on and how things operate and see where you can enhance, but also see where you need to step back and let that local nuance and culture lead.
Yes,
Because often there is, a global campaign doesn't necessarily translate. And it's like, you need to hear that from the local market and you need to listen.
100%. And it's the balance, isn't it, of listening to the things that are, I guess, really, really different, and also knowing what are the things that are not significant enough for you to, do you know what I mean?
That's a fine line.
Yeah, isn't there?
And I think the other layer to that as well, if I'm going to kind of add on to that, is also understanding where the hesitance is maybe coming from a fear or a lack of, not wanting to change and evolve. And, that's a very real thing as well. And that changes what you do, going back to the point around influence, right? That's sitting with somebody and going, what's going on for you? Tell me what's really happening here, and understanding what they're fearful of and helping them along that journey.
Yeah, and again, that comes back to that. You're there to help and build those relationships.
Absolutely,
so it's
absolutely.
Sorry, but it takes time, I guess, to build the relationships. Were there any, or have there been any things that you've even now brought with you that have been maybe superpowers for you in terms of building those relationships?
Oh, that's a nice question. Superpowers. It's always weird to talk about your own superpowers.
Yeah, no one likes it.
So actually, one of the things I do came from a game-changing training program that I went on at a past agency, and it was a 5-day intensive executive leadership course, and I was so privileged to go on it. And you work a case study, but throughout the week you do different role plays and scenarios. And the client and I talk about it now, we're friends now, so she wouldn't mind me sharing the story. But I remember halfway through one of the role plays where I was playing my client at the time, I turned around and I went, I've not been a good partner to her.
Oh.
And I literally started, and they were like, you need to keep role playing. I was like, I can't. But it was interesting because what I realized is I had been very in my head around kind of I'm not necessarily clear on what she needs, like what's going on for her, and I'm kind of pride myself superpowers on I can crack people, I understand people, right? And I realized in that moment that what was going on for her was she was in an incredibly lonely, isolating role. She was a kind of single figurehead in that space, in the organization. Yeah. And actually she'd come from an agency environment and she was a collaborator at heart. And so I suddenly realized, oh my goodness, all the things that motivate her, that give her energy, she isn't necessarily getting. And I was like, that's why she's seeing us as her team. And so that's one of the things that I always try and do when I'm working with a client. And I will also revisit that on a frequent basis, is what's going on for them? Put myself in their shoes, and I will tell my team to do the same thing. It's like, what's happening? We talk a lot about, AI is the conversation this week, right? And the disruption, good and bad, that's bringing to our industry. Clients are going through the same thing. Yes. They have the same fears and the same excitement. And so, I say to my team, think about that, talk to them about that. When you understand that, you're far more connected and you can show up in a better way.
Yeah.
But it honestly took me a program to realize that.
It's amazing,
and have that realization.
isn't it?
But I do that, I've carried that with me for years.
I just think that's wonderful. Those moments where, something happens and we all have those.
Yeah.
You go, oh, it's
The
either.
lightning bolt moment.
Yeah.
What's yours?
Mine was very kind of different, but and I've talked about it before. I would have kind of pride myself on being a reasonably empathetic person. Kind of like people. I'm curious.
That comes across, by the way. That's the yep.
But I had a team and I was doing one-to-ones and I was getting straight into so what's on this week?
Yeah.
And one guy said to me, he goes, you know what, you never asked me about my weekend. And that I literally had that, oh.
Yeah, and for some people, that's probably their worst nightmare, but for him, that's really important, that
So
connectivity.
important. Yeah. And I was like, oh. And like, what a simple thing. So that has like just, again, like that gun.
It's a small moment, right?
It floored me.
Small moment,
It floored me and I was like, oh.
I ran before I came to Brandtech, and I'm so thankful that I am back in this magical world, but I ran a gender equality coaching company for 2 years. And so my team always joke, I'm like, I have a tagline, but I talk about being and doing as equally proportionate and equally as important. And the doing, the work will always get done. We'll always pull together, we'll always show up. But the being bit, how you are together, what people need I talk a lot about social threat and reward states. Like, what puts somebody into a reward state where they feel validated to do their best work? And I think, especially in busy times and hard times, the doing can overtake, but actually it's the being that they're the people you will walk over hot coals for.
Well, well, that's the thing, isn't it? And you're not doing it for that reason either, because people see through that as well.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Don't they?
I mean, I'll be honest. I'm like, I can't be anything but myself. So however I turn up, that is what
you're getting
get.
this.
In any form.
So listen, tell me a bit about your role now.
Yes.
I think, first of all, what drew you to the role?
Yeah. So I left and came to Brandtech in October 23, and I knew Nick, the CEO, from my Mindshare days. And very, very simply, I like to say that I came to Brandtech because it feels like at the time, they were running towards what everybody was running away from. There is absolutely validity in the #1 generative AI marketing company, and I wanted to learn, right? I was really... I was hungry to get back into the industry, really curious, and honestly, they are some of I'm a big believer in work with people who, not intellectually intimidating, because that's the wrong word.
No.
I feel that's diminishing myself. But who stretch your brain. And honestly, in the, nearly 20 months I've been here, it's been wonderful. And because in my role as head of client management, I oversee the breadth of the work that we do for all our clients. I get to see so many wonderful things. I get to see the amazing creative work, like the Cannes nominated work we've got this week.
Yeah.
I see the amazing media work we do, the transformational MarTech consulting. So there's so much there and I like to bounce around, shall we say? And so I also love the kind of variety in that. And I love being somewhere that is, just the breadth of what we do.
Which is
incredible.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
I love those things like the stretch is brilliant, isn't it? Like, I want people who I'm going to learn from all the time.
You should never ever stop learning.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I did last year, and it was insane timings because I just started at JellyFish. It was a big new job, but I did the Cambridge Sustainability Leadership Institute course, and it was and honestly, I did not sleep for those 8 weeks, pretty much.
Oh my God!
But it was fascinating, and again, I do believe in if in my role, clients are going to consult me on an increasingly wide range of topics.
Right. Yeah.
And so I need to be able to talk to those things with some kind of authority, right? And so I'm a big believer in educating myself and making myself better in a breadth of spaces as well.
So what are the things clients are talking
about
you
at the moment?
Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting one, is it saying AI, but because I know everybody's saying it, but it really is.
Yeah.
And I guess to drill into that a little bit, there's a real span of it, right? So there's, I'm having some conversations with clients that are around, help us understand how this is going to impact us as a team, right? So then that's our, JellyFish training organization coming in and saying, actually, we can help you understand the impact of this on all your departments through to help me transform my creative offering through Pencil, And so there is a real, I'd say it spans the gamut from implementation to organizational change. And it depends on the kind of sector, the type of business, etc. But so I'd say that's one of them. The other thing, obviously, is everything becoming shoppable to kind of like bubble that
Right.
down. But that's the other big thing as well is, as things evolve and also as AI is changing those spaces, what does that mean for us as a brand and a company? We talk all the time. It's not going to be you doing you're not designing for consumers anymore.
Yeah.
If you're designing for agents,
So, yes.
how does that change? And they're really interesting conversations because in some of those situations, you're like, sometimes we know the answer, sometimes we don't. You think, God, that's wild, but then you think that's where we're going to be. And so
Yeah.
I think for me, what I say to the clients is, as long as you're talking about this honestly and figuring it through and trying things, that is the main thing to be doing.
Yeah, you don't have to know it or understand it or be on top of it all, but you're getting there and you're not,
Yes.
blinkers aren't on.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? You have to, we're in an era of punctuated change, right? Everybody knows that. This is not I'm not just going to make a joke about the Euro of mobile, but this is
Yes.
like an absolute societal transformation space. And so I think as long as you're acknowledging that and having the grace and courage to be like, what does this mean for my organization, for my team, for my business, but also for me personally?
Yeah.
10 years ago, I would never have thought I'd be sat teaching myself creative tools. Like I said, I did a degree where I was writing my essays in pen,
Yeah.
And so it's a different world, but you have to, one of the things that I love is people who talk about curiosity and, hire for curiosity, hire for that, look for that hunger.
Yes.
And that's what you need.
Oh
always.
my God, always. Oh,
Well,
yeah.
as somebody who does a marketing podcast, I feel like that is at the core of that, right?
100%. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
always being curious to figure out not even what's next, but just like having these interesting conversations with
Yeah.
people who have incredible experiences and just finding out new ways of thinking. And like, I genuinely
And
adore.
it's often as well, I often find that the small nuggets that somebody shares that really stick
Yeah.
with you. Like, how was your weekend? It's like,
Yeah.
I'm going to remember that and
Oh my
ask somebody
God.
next week how their weekend was. I'll be grateful for it.
Yeah.
So thank you.
No, yeah. You mentioned pencil there.
Yes.
Can you tell me a bit about pencil? Because I was talking to the guy who just passed by there, a guy called Paul Dervin, and he was like,
yeah.
we have to find someone who can talk to us about pencil. So
Oh, well, there are far better people on this page to talk to pencil. But what I would say is it is very simply our kind of creative AI tool. It's been around for a long time. They are incredible. And the really exciting thing for me about pencil and all our other AI tools as well, so you've got share of model, you've got pencil, you've got social agents. I could talk forever
Yeah.
about them. But ultimately, what's really, really nice for me is it is almost kind of coming full circle in terms of actually bringing that media and creative story together. And the exciting thing about it is it connects to all the platforms. You can see the performance, the predicted performance and outcomes of different creatives. And so I'm like, in a world where everybody is fighting for attention, in a world where the influencer economy is arguably becoming as important or more important than brand spend.
Yes, yeah.
Being able to have that creative that outperforms and that abundance of creative that pencil as a generative AI tool gives you is amazing.
Yeah, it's the abundance of creative, I
but
think,
yes.
is so key. And like, I think the days of, slow versioning, and unfortunately, I think for some creative agencies who are still trying to make money and kind of saying, well, we can do 10 of those and it'll cost you X, but you know what I mean?
I do.
And I remember working in a long time ago, working in an agency, and when those briefs came in, you were a bit like, cha-ching. Like,
You're like, I can make you absolutely 10 digital ads for X price, for sure. It's an interesting one, though, isn't it? Because I think, your podcast from day one yesterday, I kind of hit the nail on the head, and there is still that human element of it that's so important. We will talk about pencil and the brilliance of it, and it is brilliant, being able to whip up all those variations and have brilliant work.
Yeah.
And the other thing I love about it is the bias breaker element, because I think we all know in AI at the moment that there's challenges around that. And I'm very proud to work for a company that's made a conscious effort to build something in that works against that. But the human in the loop piece is paramount, right? Like, you absolutely still need that creative brilliance, that that person representing the brand to go, yeah, that's right. So, somebody a year ago mentioned the phrase, instead of FTE, full-time equivalent, human tech equivalent, HT, and I was like, I like that.
I like that too.
Human in the loop. So very much
human
so.
in the loop. I like that.
These are not my phrases. I can't take any credit for them. They are. We'll edit that bit out.
As Stephanie said.
I get angry emails from people being like, you didn't say that.
I can't think of who sent an angry email. You are right, like the human and, the power of ideas, the power of the right ideas. It's just, like, we're not going to get away from that.
But I think it's an interesting one, right? Because, with the abundance of creative that is now out there and possible, with the rise of influencer and with the shoppable piece as well, I think you have this potential kind of tension of homogeneity or kind of like lowest common denominator, so to speak. And so I loved the call to action yesterday of this is the moment to be bolder, to be braver, and I think there's a whole full of work that shows that, and that's what's amazing is it's still, even in the space where it's humans and the tech making things better, that there is still that boldness, and we're still being brave as an industry, and so long may that continue.
Yeah, 100%, and I think it will. I want to ask you one question about, you talked about sustainability, and you've done work there. How do you marry sustainability with AI? Because it's a tough one, isn't it? I use AI, and then I sometimes go, ooh. Like, how many data centers?
There is a tension there. So I will answer from a kind of brand tech perspective. One of the things I really, really love is that we've done a whole piece around that. So there has been an open report kind of published in terms of the sustainability piece around it. But it is a tension, in all honesty. And it's, if you take that tension even further, for me, beyond AI, it's like the concept of having infinite growth on finite resources, again, not my quote, is, inherently flawed, right?
Yeah.
And the system that we live in. So I think there's a really interesting thing there for me of how you redesign in terms of the conversations you have with clients and where you are in that kind of business stream, so to speak. But from an AI point of view, for me, I think the awareness piece is really, really key. And that do some digging, understand. Like, I have really open, honest conversations with Sam, who heads up our pencil team, of like, what are we doing in that space? What are we doing? How are we counteracting? And there's, we have sustainability leads internally that also drive that. So I think having that voice in the space, we live in a world of inherent tensions, and we, in the industry that we operate in, we're all sat on lovely beaches in France, and the world's hard, right? So that's inherent tension, but this is also really important. And so I think as long as you are finding space for those conversations, and where you need to actively counteracting in meaningful ways, not just here's some money to counteract that. It's like that doesn't do anything. But there are so many spaces and places that will help you with that as well. So
seeking them out, actively going and
a bit of consciousness of it as well. I think. And in I would say the same in a workspace, but also in a personal space as well, right? Like you said, we're using AI in our regular lives, so just be aware of it, and ask questions, and if somebody doesn't answer your question or have a good enough answer of this is the tension there, or the counter to it, push. That's okay. That's what we should be doing,
What I guess, so kind of at the start of the week here, and this will go out later, but like, even so far, what have you seen? Anything that you've kind of gone, oh, this is amazing or unexpected?
Oh, that's nice. Unexpected. I'm not going to say the heat is unexpected because I'm a pasty Welsh person, so I apologise for anyone watching this versus listen. What is something unexpected? I don't want to sound negative, but I'm gonna say it. I have been really pleasantly surprised at the breadth of the conversation, right? So one of the things I am also incredibly passionate about is the DEI agenda, and kind of I lead a lot of that internally at JellyFish with amazing colleagues. And so there are a lot. I'm really, really pleased to see the conversations around that. I went to an amazing panel yesterday around masculinity in our industry and and what that looks like and how we navigate it. And I love that. And I'm so happy there's spaces for those conversations. Where I struggle is where those conversations are, right? And I think that's the tension for me let's make sure we're platforming, I guess, the being piece as well as the doing piece. But I think that just the unexpected for me we talked about this a little bit kind of before we start filming. You and I could have entirely different can in the breadth of it. You could just go all in on effectiveness, and I'm just going to go and listen and learn about that. You could go all in on I'm just going to go and see brilliant work. Or you could be like, actually, I'm just going to have a load of meetings with partners and do some good. But I think I love a choose your own adventure, right? So I'm a good buffet girl. And I think that's been my unexpected joy, is the breadth and depth of conversations available.
Yeah, it is. And it's just amazing. Yeah. So many different types of people in terms of like experience, expertise, countries, cultures. Like I see the award winners coming through every day, and it's amazing just to see where the awards are coming from, all the different countries. It's really inspiring.
Beautiful.
And then
and you don't see that. I don't know if you feel the same in like, obviously kind of always having had global roles. I like to think I consume a very disparate mix of different medias, so to speak. But it's you don't often see that work, right?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so
Yeah.
it's to have it consciously come into your path as opposed to unconsciously stumbling over it or just finding stuff is really, really beautiful. And so I love the fact that I think it's all open until July 10th or something, and people can see the winners. And so I really do, it is the best of creativity, and like that's why we're all in this, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I think, seeing the work from other countries and cultures, beautiful.
Isn't it? And so I will, because I know the can get the can bashing, and people give out, it's, people, only want to win awards. But there's something wonderful about creating something and bringing something into the world that is so creative that other people think it is worth an award. And I think, good.
And also, like, I think don't get me wrong, I'm from a background where this is a personal tension for me, right? But I think let's say
it's mad. Like.
It is mad. It's wonderful. I mean, I had brunch on a yacht this morning. I'm like, that's insane. And you could tell I'd never been on a yacht because I walked up and got lost and came back down. The guy was like, you've not even gone to the right place. Amazing. Missed the room. Amazing. Anyway, I digress. But to you, that's what we were talking about.
The joy of the creative work.
Yeah. And it is, to your point about awards, I think my view on that has changed in my career. I used to be very much like, why are we recognized? Why are we? But actually, creative work does move culture into society. We are shaping and creating culture, and there's a social responsibility there. And also, every industry, in a way, recognizes and acknowledges that. And human beings are like that. If you work really hard, acknowledge that, and celebrate people and lift them up, and bring the people who've done the work to Cannes to go on stage. Would be my shout out.
Exactly. Listen, Stephanie, thank you so much for taking time out. I really, really appreciate it. It's been an absolute
pleasure. Thank you.
A great time.
And I think this is a lovely thing that you do. So thank you for doing this for the industry.
Thanks a million. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode with Stephanie. I had such an amazing time chatting to her. And we got to chat to Tom Roach beforehand, which was brilliant as well. Really enjoyed Stephanie's perspective and almost her kind of co-interviewing of me, asking me questions back, which was wonderful. I really enjoyed that. If you did enjoy today's episode and can share it with somebody else that you think would enjoy it, please do that. Rate a review or subscribe to That's What I Call Marketing. As I said, we're going to have more episodes of the Cannes sessions coming throughout the summer, and thank you so much to Friedman International for their partnership on the series. Thanks for tuning in to That's What I Call Marketing, the Cannes sessions. Brought to you by Friedman International, the international campaign experts taking the pain out of your multi-market campaigns.